Hi there and welcome back. Today we'll be talking about Margaret Fuller and the rise of 19th century feminism. Before we go any further, I'd like to give a big shout out to the boys in blue, the Dodgers. They pulled it off. Congratulations to all you fans out there. If you happen to be a Tampa Bay fan, better luck next time. I don't know what else to say about that. Really important. A couple things that I'd like to remind ourselves of. One is that we saw in Poe this excessive sensory description, this over lushness that comes out of the Romanticism movement. And we see it even in the portrayal of the two main characters and how they interact, and how there's an excess of sensory and emotional and internal processing between the two, Roderick and Madeline. Maybe perhaps like that, maybe not. More importantly, what we do need to think about is the relationship between Romanticism and Transcendentalism and feminism as we move forward looking at Margaret Fuller. And I'll keep this in mind too, because Margaret Fuller was a transcendentalist. She was very important in the movement, and Transcendentalism helped get other social movements to gain traction. So, before we go any further, I did already mention that she is a really important person in 19th century American feminism. What you also need to know about that is that there are a lot of misleading notions about feminism out in popular culture today, and depending on where you get your media from, they can vary from all kinds of things, like such as man-hater, witch, godless, all these kinds of things. And in general, this is just, certain corners of troll land, trying to slag what in general is a very crucial moment in time that helps to create a path towards egalitarianism and equality for women. So let's get to a definition that we can all get behind. We can get comfortable in this seat, though. An array, we can call feminism, in its shorthand, an array of social movements, political movements, and ideologies that work to define and establish the political, economical, personal, and social equality of the sexes. That's it. If you wanted to distill that down even further, put in a nutshell, feminism is the belief and the working towards equality in all things between men and women. Now, a lot of people are going to say, I'm not a feminist, or I'm not a feminist, but, people don't want to be tagged with that line. But if you ask them, well, hey, do you believe in equality across the board between men and women, in pay and the law and in society? And they're going to say, well, yeah, of course. Guess what? That's the definition of feminism. You're a feminist. So, pow. Try that on once we get off of lockdown and you go to your next cocktail party. So what do we need to know about her and her life? She was an incredibly smart woman. And in her era, there was nobody that outclassed her in terms of popularity and influence. She really changed the landscape, not only for women philosophers and women feminist writers, but also in terms of women transcendentalists. She was extremely well-read and extremely prolific, publishing more than 300 essays in her lifetime. 300. That's amazing. She died at only the age of 40, and I don't think I've written 300 essays in my lifetime, and I certainly haven't published 300 essays. So we're talking about an intellectual and philosophical and activist powerhouse. Now, if we go back to this notion of feminism as being, both thought and action, she's really teasing out the philosophical and intellectual underpinnings of feminism. And that's something that hadn't really been done yet, at least not in American feminism. So she remains a really important figure to up until and through today. And holy cow, the brain on her. She knew about everything: literature, history, law, political science, religion. I would even put art and the classics in there. Notice again, we're seeing that recurring theme. She was educated by her father. Is this ringing a bell? Remember, we had that same biographical pattern show up with Anne Bradstreet. And we saw it in a slightly altered form with Phyllis Wheatley, in that her family, her owning family, educated her and taught her to read. But there's this outside influence. And this once again speaks to the prejudice that still exists at this time against women going to school to receive advanced degrees and to take advanced studies. They were still really in that domestic sphere. Remember that stay within the compass image that I put up a few weeks ago? It's all about that. And like I did say earlier, she is a member of the Transcendentalist community. Remember, this is something started by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and would meet and have these gatherings where they would talk about the underpinnings of this new movement. This movement about individualism, about the divinity, and about God being inside everyone and in everything, about skepticism regarding institutions, and also advocacy for universal human rights. So it's really at its infancy, at its starting point, a universal rights organization as well. She was also the editor of The Dial. Now, hopefully you remember this from our notes we did on Ralph Waldo Emerson. The Dial is the philosophical journal devoted to Transcendentalism. And Emerson publishes in it, Fuller publishes in it, Hawthorne publishes in it, Thoreau, Henry David publishes in it. So she too is taking on this advanced reading and critiquing position within the organization too. Even further, the Great Lawsuit becomes this, I don't want to call it an atomic bomb, but it kind of is an atomic bomb in the wide range and influence that it has. It becomes extremely influential for burgeoning feminist movements, both in North America, but also in Europe and in other parts of the world. And it looks like we went back a little bit here, but we'll keep it going. A little technical difficulty. Now, you probably have already gathered that this is a very dense text. So that's why I gave you a series of pages to read carefully and others to skim, because she really goes at a fast clip and she drops lots of references and lots of different names. And again, you have to be pretty well versed in a lot of philosophy to get to some of those points. But she does talk about on page 732 how the anti-slavery party is a part of this women's rights movement, which is also really important. At the top of 732, you get a nice exchange between a woman and a man who's resistant to her ideas. Actually, it's at the bottom of page 731. It's not enough, cries the sorrowful traitor, that you have done all you could to break up the national union and thus destroy the prosperity of our country, but now you must be trying to break up our family union to take my wife away from the cradle and the kitchen hearth, to vote at the polls and preach from a pulpit. Of course, if she does such things, she cannot attend to those of her own sphere, right? Look who's talking about who belongs where again. She is happy enough as she is. She has more leisure than I have, every means of improvement, every indulgence. Then this other voice says, have you asked her whether she was satisfied with these indulgences? No, but I know she is. She is too amiable to wish what would make me unhappy, and too judicious to wish to step beyond the sphere of her sex. I will never consent to have our peace disturbed by any such discussions. Consent? You? It is not consent from you that is the question. It is assent from your wife. Am I not the head of my house? You are not the head of your wife. God has given her a mind of her own. I am the head and she the heart. God grant you play true to one another then. If the head represses no natural pulse of the heart, there can be no question as to your giving your consent. Both will be of one accord, and there needs to be present any question to get a full and true answer. There is no need of precaution, of indulgence, or consent. But our doubt is whether the heart consents with the head, or only acquiesces in its degree. And it is to ascertain the truth on this point that we propose some liberating measures. So basically, she's already building a counter-argument to people that say, to men that would say, well, she's good, she's happy as she is. Why are you taking her away from all of this? I know what she wants. And we're still hearing arguments like that around, different corners of our nation. On page 733, there is, she challenges ideas of there being hysterics at the polls. What's important to keep in mind is the word hysteria is one that applies only to women, as if women have some kind of emotional and intellectual frailty because of their physical sex. And in fact, the word hysteria comes to us from the ancient Greek hystera, which actually means uterus. So it's definitely tagged as female. We get her life story on page 735, kind of put into third person, where she calls herself Miranda and talks about how she was tutored by her father, which is really, really wonderful stuff. And again, there is so much in here. Throws in a lot of German, and yeah, I don't expect you to know that. She talks about the 4 kinds of households or partnerships on page 745, which is really, really useful to keep in mind. The first 3 start on page 745. And they're really important. As they get closer to number 4, the more egalitarian they get, where they're united on not only the emotional and social and mental levels, but also the intellectual and lifetime levels of what they want to achieve in this world. And that number 4 part is discussed on page 748 in the middle. She says at a certain point, marriage isn't for everybody on page 750, and that's totally true. Now, moving on even further, rolling through all of this. I think I barreled through some stuff that's, I forgot to put the part. There's some wonderful stuff on page 756 and 757. If you look at the bottom of 756, she says, male and female represent the 2 sides of the great radical dualism, but in fact, they're perpetually passing into one another. Fluid hardens to solid, solid rushes to fluid. There's no wholly masculine man, no purely feminine woman. So she's saying that there are these 2 drives, that yin and yang symbol, and they're constantly moving around each other. And, even the idea of what is feminine and what is masculine is a social construct. But anybody who tries to be masculine all the time is going to have a real hard go of it. And the same with somebody who tries to be feminine all the time. Again, it's a failed endeavor. History jeers at the attempts of the physiologists to bind great original laws by the forms which flow from them. They make a rule. They say from observation what can and cannot be. In vain they do this.